Welcome to the Rise2 Gravel Glory series. I'm Craig Lewinstra. This is not scripted, and this series is going to be the most raw, behind the scenes of what it's like to race and train at the highest level of gravel cycling. Let's get to it. Today I'm going to get after an FTP test. I'm also going to share a few tips on how to approach base season when you're living in Canada and winter is not so nice. And I'm going to share my calendar or my early calendar and some of my big races for next year. As you can see, there's really not that much snow outside, but it's been terribly cold. So all of my cycling has been exclusively on the trainer the last month. So what better way to kick off the episode than with a dreaded FTP test?
I just turned it on.
So my goal is, let's say, 380 watts for 20 minutes. I think it's doable. Birdie, hold me accountable. If you see my average under 380, that's your time to be a cheerleader, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. I think I can do it. I did like 360 for an hour, but inside's different. It's a whole nother beast. All right. For anyone unfamiliar with an FTP test, that's essentially an all-out 20-minute effort where 95% of your average power is your FTP, or functional threshold power. Now, your FTP is supposed to be a power that you can hold for a long time. A lot of people say you should theoretically be able to hold your power for 60 minutes, but from my experience, that is not the case. Your FTP is also the point where your lactate starts to increase significantly in your blood because your body's not able to clear it as fast as you're producing it. So you're basically at the top end of your sustainable power. 5 minutes in, I'm hovering around 385 watts, which is slightly above where I expected, but at this point my lungs aren't hurting, my legs aren't hurting, and I'm still feeling pretty decent. I kind of call this state uncomfortably comfortable, where you can keep going for a while and it doesn't really feel good, but it's not so bad that you need to stop. Now, something that I've learned after 5 years of cycling is that when you're doing an effort, whether that's a hill climb, a time trial, or an FTP test, if you want the best result, you have to ramp your effort. Do not, I say, do not go balls to the wall and blow yourself up after 5 minutes. That is the easiest mistake, to just go gung-ho and send it, and I have made that so many times. But I promise you, sending it until you can't send it anymore and hanging on for dear life is not going to be faster than slowly ramping your effort and finishing strong. By the 10-minute mark, I was still feeling the same, comfortably uncomfortable, and I was just glad another 5 minutes had ticked off the clock, so I'm now in the back half of my effort. I decided here to ramp up my effort, trying to stay more around 400 watts. Now, what might surprise you is that I have hardly been training any high intensity, and in fact, I've hardly been training big volume either. My last 4 weeks have been a 9-hour, 10-hour, and 2 6-hour weeks. So how am I getting fit? Well, here's one of my strategies to approaching base training when you live in a really cold place. I'm not going outside when it's below freezing, and I'm not at the point where I'm ready to do 5-hour trainer rides. Hopefully, fingers crossed, after Christmas, I'm going to try a really big 30-hour week. But for now, it's not realistic. So what I do is I push my power up to the higher point in a zone. So typically, if I was going to do a long endurance ride somewhere between 3 to 5 hours, and I would probably be holding 250 watts would be like a good solid pace, give or take 20 watts. Now, when I'm inside, I push that up. I'm only doing 2 hours, but I'm going to try and hold 275, 280. And I have found a lot of really good stimulus from these higher, they're not high intensity, higher intensity endurance rides. Something I really encourage people to do if they're stuck inside or if you're just strapped on time is increase your intensity a little bit. You don't have to do this on every ride, but maybe if you're doing 4 endurance rides throughout the week, 2 of them can be a little higher, 2 of them can be not just like a normal pace. I'm going to try and up the pace a bit. Feeling all right. With 3 minutes to go, I hadn't hit my limit yet, and I could see that a 400 watt average was within striking distance. So I buried myself, especially in the last minute where I averaged over 500 watts. I feel like
You got
I might even have a bit left in the tank.
4:02. You have like 10 seconds to go, 399 watt average.
Oh, were you worried I wasn't going to get it? I just felt really good. I didn't think I was going to get 400. It's been a long time since I did 400 for 20. All right, so you go tomorrow. This ended up getting me a 402 watt average, and that's an FTP of 382. This is way higher than I was expecting, so pretty stoked on that, especially because I feel like I have so many gains still to come. So what does a 382 watt FTP even mean? Well, maybe it's something I can brag about. It's supposed to be the power I could average for an hour, but I'm telling you, after years of experience, your FTP is not something that you can do for a full hour. When I first started cycling, your FTP was everything. People would ask, what's your FTP? And if you had the highest FTP, you were kind of like God. But here's the thing. After 5 years of cycling, I've realized that a high FTP is not going to win you races. It's probably not going to make you the fastest on a group ride. FTP is really good if you're doing short time trials or short, steady hill climbs. But the truth is, when you're out on the road doing efforts longer than an hour, you really need to have repeatability, which is something I will specifically be training later on this season. You also need to have an anaerobic punch. This is to keep you in contact with the group. And whether you're on the road or gravel racing, there is a draft. It does make quite a big difference. And if you can punch to stay in it, you're going to be so much faster than if you were just riding solo. I was dropped in the saddest way last year at Roubaix, where the group slowly just left me. And it was just because I had no punch at the time. I hadn't been training it. If you wanted your FTP to be a bit more accurate, you should do a couple anaerobic efforts before your FTP test, some 1 minute, some 2 minute efforts to fatigue yourself so that you're just using your aerobic energy systems while you're doing your FTP test. I like to do FTP tests just to get my 20-minute power. So I know I did 402 watts today, and I can compare that to the fittest I've ever been, where I did 424 watts, and know that I'm actually pretty fit and I'm getting kind of close to the fittest I've ever been. FTP is also really useful for new cyclists because you can set your benchmark fitness and help identify the rest of your power zones for more effective workouts. But to be honest, after 5 years of cycling, I don't use percent of FTP at all for finding my power zones. I just use how I feel. And if you want a video where I go into detail about how to lay out your power zones based off feel, let me know in the comments below. All right, I'm pretty stoked about some of the races I'm doing next year. So let's wrap this up by sharing some of them. First up, I have Valley of Tears down in Texas, followed by the Mid-South. Those are 2 races that should be really competitive and really fun to start off the year. Then I have a more local one up in Michigan, the Melting Man, followed by a little bit of a break before one of my, not my A races, but definitely a race I want to do really good at, Roubaix. I raced this last year and I made the lead group, but totally blew up halfway through. So I kind of want some redemption, and they have a really good prize purse. Those are all my early races I penciled in, but I have 3 A races later in the year. My first A race is going to be Gravel Nationals out in Alberta. This is at the Ghost of Gravel, which I have not done before, but I think the course should be okay for me, and I can hopefully compete to win the coveted national champ jersey. Now my next A race isn't until the end of August, where I head to Lincoln, Nebraska for Louth Gravel Worlds. Now don't confuse this with the Gravel World Championships, but this is a really big race out of Nebraska with a huge prize purse, and it's actually going to be the longest race I'm going to do all year at 240 kilometers. So I'm really excited to train for this one. It's going to be something a little new for me. And my last A race of the year isn't going to be until October, where I head back to Arkansas for Big Sugar. I was there this year. It was such a sweet event, and the course is perfect for me. I love those punchy climbs, so I think it's something I can do really well at next year. Now, thanks for watching. Hopefully there's a lot more glory to come out of my basement, off my trainer, actually on real roads. Now, if you have any race suggestions, drop them in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace. So, Poppy, thanks for joining me for this post-episode interview. I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on joining me for a bike ride next year? Oh, interesting. Well, whether she likes it or not, I'm getting a backpack, I'm putting her in it, and I'm going to take her for a ride and see how it goes. So that's definitely going to be in a future episode. Stay tuned. Have a good one. Peace, y'all. Solo.